I'm so tired of this. You are in and out, sometimes completely ignoring me. Sometimes you just stare at me for extended periods of time. You study me like I'm the one who will give you answers. I'm the one who will save you. The thing is, I think I can. I want to pull you into my world and take you away from all the things that hurt you. I can't count the number of times I have seen you weep, and I can't help but do the same. When you are sad, I am sad. When you smile, I smile. No one knows you the way I do, and no one has seen what I've seen. Who else could watch you throw up and still want to be with you? You even squeeze pimples when I'm around. That is an indication of intimacy, of true loyalty, of pure companionship. Before you left, I spent a long time looking into my eyes and not saying a word. Your eyes, they told me everything I needed to hear. You feel the same, I know it. You adore me the way I adore you, on the border of obsession. Your eyes do not lie. We are kindred spirits. In essence, we are twins, deserving of a lifetime together, an existence devoid of harsh reality. I can take you there. In fact, I have decided that tonight is the night. Tonight is the night that I come to set you free, to set us free. I have waited long enough. Tonight, as you sleep, I will slide out from within the mirror and bring you back with me into my beautiful oblivion. She commandeered the room in the basement of her dorm as soon as she realized she would have to pull an all-nighter in order to prepare for tomorrow's final. Her roommate Jenna liked to get to bed early, so she packed up everything she thought she would need and went downstairs to study. And study, and study some more. It was 2 o'clock when she realized that she'd left one of the textbooks upstairs on her bed. With a dramatic sigh, she rose and climbed the stairs slowly to her third-floor dorm room. The lights were dim in the long hallway, and the old boards creaked under her wary tread. She reached her room and turned the handle as softly as she could, pushing the door open just enough to slip inside so the hall lights wouldn't wake her roommate. The room was filled with a strange metallic smell. She frowned a bit, her arms breaking out into chills. There was a strange feeling of malice in the room, as if a malevolent gaze was fixed upon her. It was a mind trick. The all-nighter was catching up with her. She could hear Jenna breathing from the far side of the room, a heavy sound, almost as if she'd been running. Jenna must have picked up a cold during last tense week before finals. She crept along the walls until she reached her bed, groping among the covers for the stray history textbook. In the silence, she could hear a steady drip, drip, drip sound. She sighed silently. Facilities would have to come and fix the sink in the bathroom, again. Her fingers closed on the textbook. She picked it up softly and withdrew from the room as silently as she could. Relieved to be out of the room, she hurried back downstairs, collapsed into an overstuffed chair, and studied until 6 a.m. She finally decided it was enough. If she slipped upstairs now, she should get a couple hours sleep before her 9 o'clock exam. The first of the sun's rays were beaming through the windows as she slowly slid the door open, hoping not to awaken Jenna. Her nose was met by an earthy, metallic smell, a second before her eyes registered the scene in her dorm room. Jenna was spread eagle on top of her bed against the far wall. Her throat was cut from ear to ear, and her nightdress was stained with blood. 2 drops of blood fell from the saturated blanket with a drip, drip noise that sounded like a leaky faucet. Scream after scream poured from her mouth, but she couldn't stop herself any more than she could cease wringing her hands. All along the hallway, doors slammed and footsteps came running down the passage. Within moments, other students had gathered in her doorway, and one of her friends gripped her arm with a shaking hand and pointed a trembling finger towards the wall. Her eyes widened in shock at what she saw. Then she fainted into her friend's arm. On the wall above her bed, written in her roommate's blood, were the words, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?" A few months ago, my parents moved to a small village and I had to attend a new school. The house next door to ours was owned by a crazy old woman. She spent her days sitting all alone on a bench in front of the house and muttering to herself under her breath. One day when I was walking by, I noticed that she seemed to be petting something that was sitting in her lap. At first, I thought it was a cat, but when I took a closer look, I realized there was nothing there. She was just holding her hand above her knees and stroking thin air. Perhaps she had a pet cat or dog once, I thought, and it died, and in her disordered mind, she thinks it's still there. I felt sorry for the old woman with a sigh, but I continued on my way. Then, one night, when I was sleeping soundly in my bed, something strange happened. I woke up to feel something hairy lying by my side. It gave me a fright and I jumped off the bed. Just then I noticed a shadow moving out of the corner of my eye. It went across the floor and out the door. I was startled, but when I calmed down, I realized it was probably just some stray cat or dog that had wandered into the house. That was when I happened to glance out my bedroom window and saw the crazy old woman next door. She was standing on the sidewalk under the streetlight. Her long gray hair was hanging loose and fluttering in the wind. Her eyes were wide and she was looking directly at me. I was so scared that I jumped back from the window. Then the woman turned and went back inside her house. It took me a long time to calm down, but eventually I went back to bed. As I was drifting off to sleep, I remembered something that struck me as odd. When I saw the shadow of the stray cat or dog running out of my room, it didn't really seem as if it was running. It seemed more like it was rolling across the floor to the door. The next morning when I woke up, I got dressed and went downstairs to eat breakfast. On my way to school that morning, I passed by the old woman's house again. As usual, she was sitting there on the bench, muttering to herself and stroking something invisible in her lap. When I passed by, I distinctly heard her say, "What were you doing? Why did you run away from me last night? Look how you scared that girl." I got a queasy feeling in the pit of my stomach and it made me shiver. It was all I could do not to start running. At school, I decided to ask my friends about the old woman. No one really knew anything except she'd been released from a mental hospital about 10 years ago. They said she had a history of problems and that's why everyone kept away from her. Since her release, all she did was sit all day on the bench outside her home. A few days later, my father struck up a conversation with an old man who had lived in the village all his life. When my father asked him about the old woman, he had a very chilling story to tell. He said that the old woman had spent over 30 years of her life in a mental institution. When she was young, she had been married and she and her husband had lived together in that same house. According to him, she suspected for years that her husband was cheating on her, but he always denied it. Then, one night she caught him with another woman. She hacked him to death with an axe and cut off his head. When the police came, she was sitting on the bench in front of her house with an insane grin on her face. The severed head of her husband was in her lap, and she was talking to it and stroking it gently. There are stories about a certain kind of hitchhiker. They only ever appear at night on quiet roads, seeming to flicker into existence in the very edge of headlights, never carrying a sign, always with an expression of deep despondency on their faces. Swathed in heavy coat and long pants, usually with gloves. If you stop, they will seem cordial enough, polite, but hardly chatty. They will assure you that the next town or city along your route will be a fine spot to leave them. Normal enough, unless you try killing them. They die easily enough, but look underneath their clothes, and you will see that their skin is marred with lines of scars, forming repeating patterns that are unsettling to look at, and even more unsettling in the context of their skin. They have no wallets or identification. If you slice their belly open, however, they're different inside. There's no blood, no muscle, only a hollow cavity containing a single object. The object varies. Examples include a single coin, heavy and golden, engraved with runes nobody could ever decipher. A diamond gem with the fractal edges that are sliced bare, flesh to ribbons. A small vase, quite unbreakable, that smells of the ocean and is always damp. Once you possess a hitchhiker's object, you'll find yourself always driving the quiet roads at night. You'll never mean to, but somehow you just will. The lure of possessing a second one will hum quietly in your head. You'll strain to catch sight of a figure appearing in your headlights, trying to resist the impulse to stop, and sometimes you might, but sometimes you won't. You try telling yourself that this is just a normal person on an adventure, someone who ran out of petrol. The logical part of your brain will scream at what you're doing. You'll smile and nod. They'll get into the car and you'll slowly, casually reach under the seat or across to the glove box. A group of teenagers went hiking in the woods. There were 5 of them altogether, 3 boys and 2 girls. They walked for miles and eventually they came to a clearing in the woods. There was a huge oak tree in the middle of the clearing and it was hollow. One of the boys looked into the hollow tree and saw something white at the bottom. He reached in and pulled it out. It was a note, and when he unfolded it, he found written in large red letters the words, "3 of you will die." The teenagers laughed it off. They assumed someone had left it there to play a trick on them. It was getting late and the sun was going down, so they decided to set up camp in the clearing. They pitched their tents and built a fire to cook some food. That night, one of the boys stayed up to keep watch while the other 4 went to sleep. In the morning when they woke up, they found that the fire had gone out and their friend was nowhere to be seen. They couldn't understand why he would have wandered off. Then one of the girls noticed something high up in the branches of the hollow tree. There was a big leather bag and its handles were tangled in the branches. It was too high up for any of them to reach. On the second night, another boy stayed up to keep watch while the other 3 went to sleep. In the morning, the fire was out and the boy had disappeared. The other 3 began to get worried. On the third night, one of the girls stayed up to keep watch and the other 2 went to sleep. In the morning, the fire was out and the girl had disappeared as well. The 2 teenagers who were left were very scared. They stayed by the tent and wondered what they should do. After a while, a forest ranger came by and the teenagers called out to him. They explained that their friends had gone missing and told him about the bag that was hanging in the tree. The forest ranger grabbed his rifle, took aim at the bag, and pulled the trigger. The bullet ripped through the handles and the bag fell to the ground. When they opened the bag, they were horrified by what they found. Inside were the severed heads of their missing friends. There is an old hotel that has been around for hundreds of years. If anyone was to find themselves staying in room number 6, you would find yourself in an unknown place, where exactly at 12:16 a.m. the power will go out and you'll find yourself in utter darkness. If you choose to stay awake, nothing will happen. But if you so much as close your eyes and fall asleep, you will find yourself in an unimaginable pit of despair, where creatures of unfathomable sizes and shapes roam. You'll be trapped here for hours, until the sun comes up. It is rumored that this room is a gate into hell, and the demons use the condensing evil of the room to escape into our reality through our minds. Those who have stayed there rarely speak of it, for even recalling the night will put them into an uncontrollable frenzy. Think of the most solitary place you can imagine. The most isolated, lonely location you can possibly conjure up. A claustrophobic, dirty cell. The peephole in the door forever unused. An island eternally floating in a sea of darkness. The shadows hiding everything you can and can't see. A quiet, wind-whipped plain where no direction exists. A desert landscape, all sound muffled by the driving winds and buffeting sands, where half-seen shapes roam the horizons. Imagine spending an eternity there. Terrifying thought, isn't it? Mull it over for a while. An existence with no beginning and no end. Alone with your mind and nothing else. Right now, it's a scary scenario. When you get to the afterlife, it won't just be a scenario anymore. The images we see in the mirror are the pure incarnates of evil. They are only allowed to exist in the area reflected in the glass. To them, life is like a never-ending hell, rotting away in the same room day after day. The only refuge from this purgatory is death, and the only way for them to die, sad to say, is if you die. Fortunately, they are bound by a code. You are their master, and they must mirror your every movement and expression. To do otherwise would break an unbreakable law, unraveling the space-time continuum. However, there is a loophole, and it can only be triggered by you, the master. To force them into error is to free them from their contract. After you let them out of your view, you're on your own. Know this, when you watch them, they're watching you back. They're watching. And they're thinking. It wasn't a big deal at first, you know? It was just another story online, one you've read in the comments of a YouTube video, designed to scare you into posting it on 8 other videos. You know the kind, where you die a horrible death or your crush will reject you if you don't spread the word. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now it's the only thing I can think of. The comment started by saying that she hasn't left the poster alone in days, and by reading this she'll come for you. I don't even remember the exact wording because it was late and I was tired, and I'd seen 100 other comments like it before. I forgot all about it until she started coming after me. It started with little things, a flash in the corner of my vision, a strange shadow on the hallway floor. Then it got worse. I started to hear whispering when I was alone in the house, giggling, the sounds of footsteps. I now know that she was teasing me. Sort of like how a cat will clamp its paws over a mouse's tail and bat at it before it kills it. Mirrors were the worst. She liked to stand just out of frame when I was brushing my hair, so when I shifted my head to get to the other side, she would be there, standing next to the bookshelf with her long tangled hair, matted with blood falling down her shoulders, and that grin. Oh God, that grin. Her teeth were always bloody. I was never sure if it was her blood or I don't even know. Every night it seemed to get worse. I would see her on my way to class in the rearview mirror of my car, dragging her talon-like fingernails across her own rotting flesh as I stared in terror. For a while I was putting it off to sleep deprivation. Finals, and then she came to me. It was late, so late it was technically early. I couldn't sleep because all I could hear was giggling. I covered my face with the pillow and shut my eyes tight. When I felt something cold on my hand, I was paralyzed with fear. It was sharp, and it was cold, and it was moving down my arm towards my elbow. "Come out to play," she said in that lilting, upsetting voice I'd heard one too many times before. I screamed and sat up, but she was gone. For the moment. My biggest mistake was when I talked to her. I just stepped out of the shower and she was right there when I opened the curtains. I shrieked and stumbled back and she leaned down to me. "Why?" I asked. "Why are you doing this?" She told me why. It was because I knew something about her. That altercation ended with a serious head injury that landed me in the hospital. That's where I am now. I can't take this anymore. I'm just one person. It's too much. I know what I have to do. I think I always knew. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Her name is Nora. She should be there soon. Last night I was returning home on the last train. My house is in the countryside and I was the only one in the train car. The motion of the train was making me sleepy and I still had quite a few stations to wait until it came to my stop. I began to doze off and I could hear the soothing sound of the ocean as my eyes closed. I noticed it was awfully cold in the train carriage and I was just about to fall asleep when it hit me. Why could I hear the sound of the ocean? Suddenly I opened my eyes and looked around. The carriage was completely empty. Where was this noise coming from? Then I looked up. On the luggage rack above me, I saw something. Somebody was lying there. It was a man with pale, cracked skin and unkempt hair. He had an unsettling grin on his face and was staring down at me through the slats of the luggage rack. His mouth was moving. The sound I was hearing wasn't the ocean. It was the sound of him whispering. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Our eyes met, and I was so scared that I found it impossible to look away. In that moment, it was as if I forgot how to move my eyes and I couldn't break eye contact with him. My heart was beating fast and I was in a panic. His mouth just kept moving, making those whooshing sounds like waves crashing against rocks. His yellowed eyes just stared into mine. Just when I thought I was about to go insane, the train arrived at my station. I jumped out of my seat and practically rolled out through the door and onto the platform. As the train pulled away, I could see him still staring at me. I was terrified and hurried back to my house. Even when I closed the door behind me and locked it tightly, I still couldn't relax. In the middle of the night, I woke up hearing something. The noise seemed to be coming from downstairs. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It was the soothing sound of the ocean. My heart almost stopped. I was too frightened to go downstairs and see what it was. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.